Hello fellow Blenderers, this is Peter here with PM Designs. Today we're diving into emulating 2D mouth animation in Blender. If you're decent at traditional animation, you can always animate it with grease pencil. I'm not, so I thought I'd share 3 methods for making 2D mouths in 3D, and of course attaching them to your character rig in a way that means you can move the mouth wherever you want. The first method is fairly widely known, but I'll include it anyway. The other 2 are possibly my own. I don't think I've seen anything like them before, but of course it's a combination of pre-existing Blender skills. As I speak now, I'm using the third method. Here are examples of the first and second methods. This is method 1. This is method 2. Let's take a look at the pros and cons so you can make a decision about which method interests you and you don't have to watch the whole video. You can just skip to the marked chapters. The chapters are marked M1, M2 or M3, and if they're not marked with that, they apply to all methods. Method 1 is basically an image plane slapped onto your guy's face and you cycle through 2D images to animate it. It's quite widely known, I think, and is also one way of doing 2D eyes. Method 2 is similar to the 2D eye rig that I made a tutorial about a while ago. It uses a shader with gradients to form the shapes of the teeth and tongue. The teeth and tongue can be positioned, rotated, or scaled by using bones. The mouth shape is controlled by shape keys, which can also be controlled via a rig that we'll make. Controlling the shape keys via bones simply streamlines the animation process a bit. Method 3 took me a long time to refine. Maybe it still needs refinement. If you have any ideas, please share with me and the community down in the comments. This one is the only method which offers full interpolation between the mouth shapes to give a more digital animation look, which can of course be stepped. It's a collection of meshes, all with matching shape keys, which are controlled by the rig. Method 1 is the easiest, by far, to set up. The constant interpolation look is quite popular at the moment, so I can say that this method does have its own style. The cons are that the mouth images can't be edited. That's pretty self-explanatory. Maybe that's the same as the second one, which is limited mouth shapes. You would have to source new images for every mouth shape that you want. They would all have to be the same style, and that can be quite hard to get unless you're a decent artist and can draw them all yourself. And the final con, if you consider it a con, is that it only offers constant interpolation. There is no way to have completely smooth blending between mouths. Method 2's setup is a little more involved, but less than half of the work required for Method 3. It is more posable than Method 1. You'll be able to change the location, rotation, and scale of your teeth and tongue. We'll make a rig which will help with the shape keys for the actual mouth mesh. And because the teeth and tongue are posable, there will be blending between poses, and you'll be able to make pose assets for ease when it comes to animating. The cons are that the shapes are relatively fixed. For example, if you make rectangular teeth, they will be rectangular until you make some big changes to the shader. Once you've made your shape, you can't really do much with that shape beyond squashing or stretching. The tongue is just going to be an oval, and the teeth will be rectangles for simplicity's sake. You can make other shapes, but I won't be going into all of those possibilities. The other con for Method 2 is that the posing is quite limited. The teeth and tongue can never leave the mouth area. Method 3 has the most flexibility with regards to shapes. You can always add new shapes and or poses as you go fairly easily. This method is fully posable, the same as Method 2. You can animate on the fly or create all sorts of pose assets with the combination shape keys if you wish. The mouth objects can be moved beyond the borders of the mouth, so you could easily make your character stick their tongue out, for example. And the best pro of this one is that it offers the best blending. Because the mouth objects are all separate meshes with their own shape keys, you can have any kind of interpolation on the keyframes, allowing for some smooth animation. The cons for this method are that it has the longest setup, but remember that once you've done the setup, you can use it indefinitely. Also, this method is not as 2D as Method 1 and Method 2. The mouth, tongue, and 2 sets of teeth are all separate meshes, so they have to be stacked in order to work. It's barely noticeable, but if you're planning to do an extreme close-up shot from the side, you might not be happy with the result. Hopefully that's helped you decide which method you want to try. Whichever one you like, there are some things you'll need before we start. A character head for scale reference. If you're doing Method 1, you'll need your mouth images as separate PNGs, named numerically. M2 and M3, you might want some reference on which to base your mouth shapes. In object mode, press number pad 7 to switch to top-down view, then press Shift and A and add a mesh plane. Use your character's head as a reference and position your mesh plane to get the approximate scale right. Apply the scale, only the scale. Zero out location and rotation transforms. Name your mesh plane to be something like mouth. Now switch over to the shader editor and create a new material. Give it a name so you can easily find it later. Make sure you have Node Wrangler enabled, then delete the principal BSDF. Press Shift-A, add an emission node, and then an image texture node. Connect the output of the image texture node to the emission node, and then connect the emission node to the material output. Next, select your image texture node and click Open to locate your mouth images. Select all images and open them. The image texture node will now switch to an image sequence node automatically. Set the extension on your image sequence node to clip. To set the transparency, add a transparent BSDF and a mix shader. Connect the emission node to the bottom input of the mix shader and the transparent node to the top input. Then connect the alpha output from the image sequence node into the factor of the mix shader. Adjust the UV if the size isn't right. Now let's animate the mouth images. Enable auto refresh and set the frames to 1, then keyframe the offset value. To prevent Blender from automatically interpolating between keyframes, set the keyframe interpolation to constant. This way, only the selected mouth images will appear, rather than blending through all of them. For the final step, let's just subdivide the mesh a bit. Tab into Edit mode, select All with A, then right-click and find Subdivide. Down in the bottom left corner, set the iterations to 2. And that's it, your 2D mouth is now set up and ready to attach to your character. When you're ready, jump ahead to Step 9, the Lattice. We'll need a camera later, so let's just add one now. Zero the transforms and position it just a little above the 3D cursor for the meantime. Bring in your character's head, or whatever head you'll be using for this tutorial, and make sure that you're happy with the character's scale, but hide them for now. In object mode, go to top-down view and press Shift-A and add an image reference. Find and open your mouth shape reference image if you're going to use one. And name the object Reference Mouths. Now move and rotate your reference image into position on your character's head to gauge the rough scale for the mouth. Adjust the scale as needed. Now apply only the scale, then zero out the rotation and location transforms. Press 0 to go into camera view and position the reference image under the camera so that just one mouth shape is centered. If multiple mouths are in the frame, do not scale the mouth shape reference. Set your camera resolution to be a square. Adjust the global Z location of the camera until your framing is better. Or snap camera to view and just scroll up a bit. Now move your reference images down on the global Z just a bit so we can work more clearly with our mesh when we bring that in. Bring up a timeline and set the frame count to as many as you have mouth shapes to make. I'm going to make 16 mouth shapes, so I'll have 16 frames. Enable auto keying and insert a keyframe for your mouth reference by placing your cursor in the viewport and pressing I. Press 0 on the numpad, move forward one keyframe and reposition the reference image for the next mouth shape. We are animating the reference just to make things easier later. Make sure there's a new keyframe in the timeline. On the last image in a row, manually insert a keyframe by pressing I to ensure you get that Y-axis too. Repeat until you have keyframed all the mouth references in position. Check through and make sure that your references are centered correctly. That's it for the setup. Now go ahead to the next part, which is step 3, method 2 and 3, mouth and shapes. In object mode, top-down view, add a mesh circle. Give your new mouth mesh a name. Tab into edit mode and scale down towards a 3D cursor until it's roughly the size of your mouth reference. Still in edit mode, box select all of the vertices on one side of the circle. Delete those verts. Add a mirror modifier. Now to make your base mouth shape. From the top orthographic view, move the vertices until you've got a base mouth that you like. This should be an at-rest mouth, but not closed. Enough space to place teeth and a tongue. Press number pad 0 to switch to your camera view and make sure that the framing is still good. In object mode, apply the mirror modifier now. If you don't, you won't be able to make asymmetrical shape keys. Add a new shape key to your mouth mesh. This will be your basis. Add another and name it the same as the first mouth shape you want to make. For me, the first one is ah, so that's what I'll call it. Vizime ah. Bring back your reference and go to your first frame. Select your mouth mesh. Select the shape key you're going to edit and tab into edit mode. Create the shape of your first shape key. Be sure to enable X symmetry to save time. I'm not really following this reference. I've got my own plan. This is just for your benefit. When you've finished the first one, go to the next frame in the timeline, add a shape key to your mouth mesh, and name it the same as your next mouth shape. Tab into edit mode and make your next shape. Rinse and repeat until you've created all of the shape keys you want for now. Once you're happy with all of your shape keys, we need to fill the mouth shape. Fill it however you like, just try to keep good topology. We could have done this before applying the mirror modifier, but then we'd have had to rearrange more verts when doing the shape keys. Check back through your shape keys to make sure they're okay. And of course we'll be using a subdivision surface modifier, but level 1 of subdivision should be plenty for now. Before going ahead, now would be a good time to bring back your character head and make sure you're happy with the scale of your mouth mesh. Don't forget to apply only any scale adjustments and zero out the location and rotation again, bringing your mouth mesh back to the 3D cursor at the world origin. Before we finish this step, let's just add a material to our mouth mesh. Select the mouth and add a new material. Name it and change the surface type to emission. Set the color to black and the emission strength to 0.9, so it's not too bright when we make the other colors. That's it for this step. M2, you can stick around for the next part. M3, you guys should jump ahead now to step 5, M3 mouth objects and shapes. First, we'll need some empties to help control our teeth and tongue. Let's start by adding one empty in the center of the mouth. Scale it down to a suitable size. Add a shrink wrap constraint to the empty and set the target as your mouth mesh. Name this empty tongue. Duplicate it and move the new empty slightly up on the y-axis to where the top teeth will be. Rename it to teeth T. Duplicate the empty and move it down on the y-axis to where you want the bottom teeth to be. Rename it to teeth B. Do not apply any transforms to these empties. We can now batch rename them all with the suffix control and move them into a new collection. Now let's select our mouth mesh and select the material that we made in the last stage. At the moment, we've just got an emission shader set to black. Add a gradient texture node set to linear. Connect that to the emission shader via a color ramp. Set the color ramp to constant with the first stop at 0 and place the second stop on 0.5. The first stop will be your mouth color and the second will be the teeth. With Node Wrangler enabled, select your gradient node and press Ctrl and T to get the texture coordinate and mapping node. Change the output of the texture coordinate node from generated to object and set the object to be your teeth top control empty. On the mapping node, set the X location offset to 0.5 and then set the Z rotation to -90 degrees. Now we'll black out the sides of our teeth. Shift select the color amp, the gradient node, and the mapping node. Press Ctrl, Shift, and D to duplicate the nodes, keeping them connected, and drop them down just below. Zero out the rotation on the new mapping node. On the new color amp, set the first marker to 0 and the second to 0.15. Add another marker and position it at 0.85. Set the color of this new marker to be the same as the mouth. Connect both color amps with a mixed color node set to multiply with a factor of 1. Lower the X scale on the new mapping node until the teeth are at a suitable width. Frame everything from the texture coordinate node to the multiply node with Ctrl J and give the frame a label, like top teeth. Select the whole group and duplicate it. Drop it down below and label it bottom teeth. In the new bottom teeth group, on the upper mapping node, switch the Z rotation from -90 degrees to +90 degrees. On the texture coordinate node, switch the target object to be your bottom teeth control empty. You can now connect the upper and lower teeth with a mixed color node set to add with a factor of 1. You'll need to clamp the result to avoid the teeth blending over each other. Name this add node to be teeth output and give it a green color for the time being. We don't need the other teeth node trees for now, so we can collapse those out of the way and frame it up to make things a bit more readable. I'm also going to frame both sets of teeth and include the green teeth output add node because it is the main output for the teeth now. Let's disconnect that teeth output from the emission node for now. Add a gradient node set to spherical. Add a color amp as we did before, set to constant and set to half and half. The first marker color will be the same as your mouth color, and the second color should be what you want for your tongue. Select the gradient node and press Ctrl and T, bringing up the texture coordinate and mapping nodes. As before, set the coordinate output to be object and set the target to be your tongue control empty. You can now connect the color amp to your output to see the effect. Use the mapping node's scales and or the color amp to get the size and shape that you want for your tongue. Frame this as your tongue node tree. Now we have to mix the teeth and tongue in a way that will allow the tongue to be either behind or in front of the teeth. After your green teeth output node, add a mixed color node and connect the teeth output result into the factor and the B input of the new mix node. Give this new mix node a blue color and call it tongue back. Duplicate this mix node by pressing Ctrl, Shift, and D and drop it down below the original teeth back mix node. Call this node teeth front and give it a yellow color. On the yellow teeth front mix node, remove the teeth output result from input B and put it into A. So these two mix nodes should be identical except we've switched the inputs. Now bring the result from your tongue color amp into the A input of the blue tongue back node and the B input of the yellow tongue front node. We now need to mix these together, so after those two mix color nodes, add another one. Give it a pink color for now. Connect the blue mix node into the A input of the pink node and connect the yellow mix node into the B input of the pink node. With Node Wrangler enabled, drag a new connection out from the result of the yellow mix node and search for greater than. Drop the greater than node in next to the yellow mix and set the threshold to 0. Connect the result from the greater than node to the factor of the pink mix node. Now let's add one more mix color node with the factor set to 0. We can label this node tongue front back. And give it a red color for now. Take the result from your blue tongue back node and connect it to the A input of the red mix node. Take the result from the pink mix node and connect it to the B input of the new red mix color node. Finally, connect the result from your red mix node directly into the emission node. It should all be connected now, and the factor on your red mix node will determine whether the tongue appears in front of or behind the teeth. When animating this, I recommend that you keep it on constant interpolation, otherwise the tongue will fade through the teeth. When we make the drivers for the shape keys, we could also add it into here to automate that process too. You can remove the colors from the nodes now if you don't want them. That's the mouth material done for M2, so you should jump ahead now to step 6, M2 and 3, adding bones. Right, M3, let's make our teeth and tongue. Make a collection for your mouth and the upcoming pieces. I'm going to make collections for method 2 and method 3. You can just call yours mouth objects if you like. First, let's put a subdivision surface modifier on the mouth mesh at level 1. Then duplicate the mouth object, dropping it where it is with right click or escape. Press F2 and rename this duplicate to tongue. In your shape keys menu, select the basis shape key. Click this drop-down menu and choose Remove All Shape Keys. Don't worry, we'll get them back later and save time with drivers. Just to make things easier to work with, let's add a shrink wrap modifier to the tongue, set to Above Surface. The target should be the mouth mesh. Set the offset at 0.001 for now. With the tongue mesh selected, tab into Edit mode. Box select one side and delete those vertices. Then add a mirror modifier. Place the mirror modifier at the top of your modifier stack, with the subdivision surface modifier in the middle and the shrink wrap modifier should be at the bottom. Still in edit mode on the tongue, press 3 for face select and choose the faces which will be your top and bottom teeth. Shift and D to duplicate them and drop them where they are with right click. Press P to separate by loose parts. Back in object mode, rename your top and bottom teeth meshes. Starting with the tongue, in edit mode, I'm going to scale it down towards a 3D cursor until it's about the right size for my base tongue. Then I can just do a bit of adjusting until I'm happy with the shape of the tongue. Onto the top teeth. We can sharpen some edges to adjust the shape of these corners by just selecting those edges, pressing Shift and E, then moving the mouse away from the center. This will add a crease. To add a maximum crease, you can just press Shift and E followed by 1, or -1 would remove the crease completely. Continue with the bottom teeth. Once both teeth and tongue are done, apply the mirror modifiers on them. And to stop the tongue from clipping with the teeth, let's just adjust the tongue shrink wrap offset to 0.0005. The last part of this is just to add some colors. Your object should already have the black mouth material that we made for the mouth. We could remove that, but it's quicker to just duplicate the material, rename it, and then we only need to change the color. After doing the top teeth, you can just select the same material for the bottom teeth. Let's put those meshes all into a collection to keep things tidy. That's the mouth objects ready, but let's just compare them to a character and make any adjustments to the scales before we go ahead. Let's add an armature single bone. In object mode, press F2 and rename this to be mouth rig or something similar. Tab into edit mode and rename this bone to be mouth rig root. Press numpad 3 to go into side view and rotate the bone by 90 degrees. This bone will roughly represent the character's head position. Extrude a new bone from this end of the root bone. Name the new bone mouth rig jaw. This bone will allow us to move the mouth across the face, kind of like a jawbone. Let's try to get the scales right first. Bring in your character head, and if the character is already rigged, bring the rig too. In edit mode, preferably from the side orthographic view, Edit the mouth rig, jaw, and head bones until they're positioned roughly where they should be. It doesn't have to be perfect. Back in object mode, zero out the location and rotation of the mouth rig object. In edit mode, with the jawbone selected, shift select the root bone and press Ctrl and P and choose Keep Offset. Next, let's position our mouth to be in line with the end of the jawbone. M2ers, be sure to grab the empties along with the mouth mesh when you move it. M3, be sure to move all of your mouth objects at once. You can apply the location transform of your mesh or meshes. M2, don't apply any transforms on your empties. Back to our mouth rig, tab into edit mode. Select the tip of the jawbone and press E then Z to extrude another bone straight up. Select this bone and rename it tongue control, or something similar that you can remember. Don't just call it tongue because that's the same as the meta rig bone name. Duplicate this bone with Shift and D and move it to where the top teeth will be. Rename this bone to teeth T control or similar. Duplicate one more and this will be the bottom teeth. M2 people can position the bones exactly on the empties by first selecting the empty, then press Shift and S and set cursor to selected. Select your rig, tab into edit mode, select the relevant bone and press Shift and S again, then choose selection to cursor. Rinse and repeat for positioning the other bones. M3, you can just position the bones wherever you like, but keep them aligned centrally. I'd recommend adding a shrink wrap constraint to the teeth and tongue bones. This will stop you from taking the bones too far away. And let's align it to Y normals. Just don't forget to remove the constraint from any other bones you duplicate. M2ers, we should parent our empties now. Select your top teeth empty, then shift select your mouth rig. Go into pose mode and select the top teeth bone. Press Ctrl and P, then choose bone. This will parent the empty directly to that bone. Repeat the process to parent the other two empties to their relative bones on the rig. Once that's done, we can completely disable those empties so we don't accidentally change them. M2 and 3ers. We can parent the mouth mesh to the rig in the same way. Select the mouth mesh, then shift select the mouth rig. In pose mode, select the jawbone, press Ctrl and P and choose bone. If we now move that jawbone in pose mode, the mouth mesh will follow. M2ers, you'll also see your teeth and tongue following nicely. M3ers, we won't be parenting the teeth and tongue meshes just yet. Just for practice and to make our rig look a bit better, let's make some custom shapes. First, let's just do some housekeeping. We want the mouth meshes in one collection so we don't have to keep expanding the rig after the parenting. M2 empties should be in another collection, and we've got our rig in there too. I'm going to work with M2 for now, but M3 can still follow. Select the parent collection and right-click, choose New. Let's name this new collection Custom Shapes. In object mode, add a mesh circle, delete half the shape in edit mode, and then give it a mirror modifier. I'm going to name this one CS Mouth, but it will be used to represent the jawbone. Before changing the shape, I'm going to duplicate it for the tongue shape and name the duplicate accordingly CS Tongue. We'll use the CS Mouth mesh to create a custom shape which will represent the mouth bone, just to make things more readable. And then the tongue and the two teeth shapes. You can make these as detailed or simple as you like. Name them clearly so you can find them later. Now we are going to assign the shapes to our bones. They are going to appear incorrectly at first, but we'll fix that in a minute. Let's start with the jawbone. Select your rig and go into pose mode. Select the jawbone and open up the Bone Properties tab on the bottom right. Scroll down until you find Viewport Display and expand that. Then expand Custom Shape. In this box where it says Custom Object, search for the custom shape that you made for your jawbone, or just use the eyedropper on the object in the outliner. Then select the top teeth bone and assign the top teeth custom shape. Repeat for the last two bones. The scale or rotation is probably wrong on all, if not most of your custom shapes, so let's fix that. Just come down a little in the Custom Shapes tab and adjust the scale or rotation. With the scale, try to keep it to round numbers for easier maths later. We can also adjust the translation to position them a little distance in front of the mouth mesh. Now back to editing the rig to create the bones for the mouth shape keys. This is very simple, but just a bit repetitive. Let's grab this tongue bone and disable the shrink wrap constraint from viewport temporarily. Then we're going to duplicate it and position it to the right a little bit, so that Shift and D, then X to move it directly on the X axis. Remove the shrink wrap constraint from this bone, and you can re-enable the tongue bone's shrink wrap constraint. I'm going to call this bone Viseme Root. I'll then parent the bone Viseme Root to the mouth rig root, which is representing the head. We're going to make a lot of bones here to control all of our shape keys, and we want them to stick fairly close to our character's head. With this bone selected, I'm going to lock all of the transforms. In top-down view still, I'll select the Viseme Root bone I just made and duplicate it, moving it straight into position up and to the left. This will be for one of my Viseme shape keys, and I have 16 of those, so this bone will be positioned as the first bone in a row of 4. We need to name this bone the same as our first mouth shape key. For me, that's A, so I'll call it Slider A. Under your Armature tab, Viewport Display, enable Axes. If you're in top-down view, the Z-axis is probably pointing down as you see it. We need to change this for later. Press N to open up the Side tab and locate the bone roll. If it's 0, change it to 180. Press numpad 3 to go to the right orthographic view. Select the bone we just made called Slider A, duplicate it and rotate it 90 degrees clockwise. That's Shift and D, then R90. Name this new bone Slider Box A. Parent Slider Box A to the Viseme Root bone and keep offset. Then parent the bone Slider A to Slider Box A in the same way. We are going to add some constraints to these bones, but first let's set up some more custom shapes. Hide everything else in the viewport for now and go to top-down view. Add a mesh circle. Rename it something like CS Slider Circle. That's done. Now add a mesh plane. Tab into edit mode and press A to select the whole mesh. Press X and then delete only faces. This will leave us with an empty square. Back in object mode, scale the whole object so it just sits nicely outside your circle. Then scale by 3 on the global Y axis. So S, then Y, then 3. Now reposition the rectangle so that the slider circle shape is close to the bottom. Apply all transforms for the rectangle shape. I'm going to name this one CS Slider Box. I can move these new custom shapes into my custom shapes collection. Go back to your mouth rig. Go into pose mode and find your first bone slider, which for me is Slider A. Same as we did before. Go to the bone properties, viewport display, custom shapes, and set the custom object to be the CS Slider Circle. This will probably come up rotated incorrectly, so just rotate it by 90 degrees on the X under the Custom Shape tab. Looking down at your mouth and the current rig, be sure to adjust the scale to suit the estimated final size of your rig. I'm going with 0.25 for the scale. This will vary based on the size of your bones. Whatever you end up with, make a note of it. Once you're happy with the scale of that, select your first slider box bone. For me, that's Slider Box A. And I'm going to set the custom shape to be my CS Slider Box base. Whatever you set as the scale for your Slider Circle custom shape can be copied and pasted into the box bone's custom shape value, and it should fit perfectly. If not, then you might have edited the rectangular mesh in edit mode. Now let's set some constraints. Select the slider bone, unlock the Z location transforms, then come down to bone constraints. Add a limit location constraint. Enable all axes and set to local space. But in the maximum Z distance, we're going to give it a little bit of slack. You can eyeball this if you want, or we can stick to my numbers, which means you won't have to do any maths later. Because I used 0.25 for the scale of my custom shapes, I'm going to set the Z limit to be 0.025. Then I'll raise this slider to its maximum value to see where it goes. Next, I'll locate my box custom shape, tab into edit mode, grab the top two verts and move them up along the y-axis while looking at my rig to gauge the size. Now that's set up, we need to make one more bone. This is going to help us place icons or letters to identify each shape key. First, in edit mode, select the slider box bone and duplicate it. Then let's move it straight up on the y-axis to just above where the original slider box bone is. We can resize this one a little bit because it's not too important. Name it something like title A or whatever your first shape key is. Next, we need to make the custom shape for the shape key's title. I'm going to use text for this. Add a text object and set the alignment to center and middle. Leave this object's name as text. Duplicate the text object and hide the original. Name this duplicated text object to be something like CS Viz A, because it's going to be a custom shape for my first shape key. Change the text to a simple title to have in your rig. Mine will be A. Select the text and in the Object drop-down menu find Convert to Mesh. I recommend adding this to your quick favorites for the next few steps. Tab into Edit mode. Press 2 for Edge Select and in the Select drop-down menu find Select All by Trait and choose Non-Manifold. Press Ctrl and I to invert your selection, then press X and delete only edges and faces. Next, we can go back to our rig and set the custom shape for the title bone, just like we did before. We now have the 3 basic bones for each Vizime shape key. In edit mode, select all 3 bones. We want to duplicate them and space them apart evenly. Knowing that my limit location constraint is 0.025, I'm going to use that distance for the horizontal spacing and then some. Then I'll double that for vertical spacing. So I'll press Shift and D, then X, then 0.03, followed by Enter. Now I can box select these 6 bones, 3 sliders, 3 slider boxes, and 3 titles, duplicate them, and move them over by double the distance. That's Shift and D, then X, then 0.06 to move them both over by double the distance. Next, I'll box select these 4 mini setups, duplicate and move them down by a set distance. For me, that's 0.06, but it depends on your custom shapes. Now I'll duplicate the first and second row and move them down by double the distance, so 0.12. Back in object mode, check the spacing of your slider boxes and titles, making sure they don't intersect. If they do, adjust that in edit mode. We have to rename all of the bones now, keeping their original tag of title, slider box, or slider, and just changing the suffix to match the relative shape keys. Now we have to go through and create all of the other custom shapes from text, but first let's frame up our rig. Select the Vizime root bone in pose mode and change the custom shape object to be the slider box custom shape we made earlier. Then we can simply adjust the transforms until it nicely frames the bones. Quite a repetitive task coming up now. First, we have to duplicate and edit our original text base for as many more titles as we need. Hide all of the text objects except for the first one. In edit mode, type whatever the shape key is. For me, that's E. Tab into object mode. Convert to mesh. This is why you should have this added to quick favorites. Then tab into edit mode. Select all non-manifold edges. Press Ctrl and I. Then delete only the edges and faces. Tab back to object mode. Name it something like CS Viz E and move the new custom shape into the custom shape collection. Unhide the next text object. Repeat as before. Edit text to next shape key title. Object mode. Convert to mesh. Edit mode. Select non-manifold edges, invert selection, delete only the edges and faces. Object mode, rename to CS Viz something, move to the custom shapes collection. Once you've made all of your title custom shapes, get back to the mouth rig and assign the custom shapes to the bones. The transforms of the title should be the same because we duplicated the first bone. This is relatively easy, but because your bones might be different to mine, you'll have to do a bit of maths for yourself. First, select your mouth mesh, then find the first shape key you want to control with your rig. Right-click in the value box and select Add Driver. Set the driver type to be scripted expression. Set the type down here to be Z location and the space to be local. Then set the object to be your mouth rig and choose whichever slider bone will control the first shape key. If we now slide that bone up, the mouth should start to change shape, but probably not enough. Take note of how much the shape key has changed when your slider bone is up at its maximum position. If your limit distance constraint is set to 0.025, for example, you need to multiply that by 40 to make 1. If the distance is 0.03, then you'll need to multiply that by 33.333333. Right-click on the shape keys value, which is now purple, and choose Open Drivers Editor. Select the shape key on the left and come over to the right and add a modifier. Choose a generator. Keep the coefficient at 0 and change the power of x to be whatever the result of the multiplication we just discussed. Check that your driver is working properly, checking the halfway position too. Place your mouse over the purple shape key value and right-click. Choose Copy Driver. Hovering over the value of your next shape key, right-click and Paste Driver. Paste the driver into all of the shape keys. Then, all we have to do is right-click on the second shape key's value, choose Edit Driver, and select a different target bone. Do the same for all the other shape keys. Check all of the bones after to make sure the shape keys are working. Before we finish this step, let's set up some pose assets. This will make animating and posing a bit easier. In your timeline, make sure auto-keying is disabled. Divide your window somewhere and get an asset browser set to current file. Let's just enable our first shape key, A. To make the pose more interesting or accurate, I can make adjustments to the teeth and tongue. Then select all of the mouth bones, including the sliders, and we are going to create a pose asset for this. In the Asset Browser window, select Asset and then Create Pose Asset. A new pose asset should appear with a thumbnail. Press N to bring up the menu and name your pose properly. Zero out all of your bones with Alt-G, Alt-R and Alt-S. Raise your next shape key slider. Adjust the tongue and teeth. Select all the bones, create a new pose asset and name it clearly. Create as many pose assets as you like. Just remember to name them clearly and give them all the same prefix so they will be listed together. M2 people should jump ahead now to step 9, the lattice. M3 people stick around for the next step. Now, M3ers, we're going to copy all of the shape keys with drivers to our teeth and tongue meshes. First, make a note of the shrink wrap offsets for the teeth and tongue. We're going to lose these modifiers and we'll need to replace them. Select your two teeth meshes and the tongue mesh, then Shift and select the mouth mesh. Press Ctrl and J to join all of the meshes. Tab into edit mode, press A to select all, and then P to separate by loose parts. You should now have your 4 original parts. Rename them and replace the shrink wrap modifiers on the teeth and tongue. Now the bones will control all of the shape keys on all of the mouth parts. We just have to make the shape keys. Let's bring back our reference on frame 1. Select the top teeth and choose the first shape key under basis. Tab into edit mode and create your new shape. Then continue in edit mode, making all of your top teeth shape keys. Be careful when making the teeth shape keys that they don't move too unnaturally. Think whether they are actually moving vertically or just being covered by lip movement. Then continue with your bottom teeth and tongue shape keys. If you want to make a shape key where the tongue is in front of the teeth or goes beyond the borders of the mouth, we can do that too. Again, you're going to have to adjust this based on the size of your objects and bones, but I hope I can point you in the right direction. Let's make a driver to enable whether the shrink wrap is active in viewport and then in render too. Select your tongue mesh and locate the real-time viewport display icon. Right-click and add a driver. This will be a scripted expression. Choose your target bone and set to whatever local location is going to drive the new expression. We want the viewport display to be enabled when the bone is at its default position and disabled when it's at its max. We know our bone can only move a certain distance, so we need to use that distance in our expression. For me, my limit distance was set to 0.025, so I'll use that as my threshold. The expression is this: 1 if Z location, for me, 1 if variable is less than 0.025. Anything else is 0, else 0. In human speak, that means it's enabled if my bone's Z location is below whatever threshold I set, disabled if in any other position. If you wanted your slider to work in the opposite direction, simply switch the 1s and 0s in that expression, or switch the less than for a greater than. If the mouth is too far forward when the shrink wrap is disabled, adjust the tongue's position in object mode. This method can also be used if you want to be able to switch between different meshes. Just remember that it will be constant interpolation. You can parent your mouth object meshes to the relative bones now. Hopefully by now you're starting to see a pretty nice mouth mesh coming together. The only thing left to do is to stick it to the character's head properly. In the next step, we'll set up the lattice, and then we're going to attach the rig to our character. If you want your mouth mesh to deform around your character's face, you will need to add a lattice. If you want the mouth to be completely flat, floating a little in front of the character's head, you don't really need this. You can just skip to step 10. Add a lattice and name the lattice clearly. In object mode, align your lattice roughly with your mouth mesh or M1 image plane. Doesn't have to be perfect. Then scale the lattice down until it surrounds your mouth. Best to enable whichever pose has the biggest mouth shape. Under the lattice data, set the U and V to about 8 for now, and the W to 0. M1, you should parent your mouth image plane directly to your lattice. M2 and 3's parent the lattice to the jawbone the same way that we did it with the mouth mesh. Select your mouth mesh or image plane and add a lattice modifier. Set the target as the lattice we made a minute ago. Now if you move the lattice in edit mode, the mouth should deform with it. M3's, I think that the teeth and tongue don't need the lattice modifier. You can experiment and see for yourself. There is still one more step to go, but let's save this as a new file first. This will be our original mouth rig, which we can append into other files and adjust without accidentally messing up the original. Let's open up a new file with just our character in it. Now under File, locate Append and then find your Blender file containing the original mouth rig. We might have to tidy up the collection a bit, but hopefully it's all there. If not, there's something saved incorrectly in your original file. If you didn't want the lattice, you can just align your mesh or meshes now and parent them to your character's head mesh or head bone. If you're doing M1 and just have a lattice, you can just move the lattice into position because you parented your image plane to it. In object mode, we just now have to move our rig until the mouth is aligned with the front of the face. If when doing this you notice a big problem, continue with the next part and we'll address issues in a minute. Now select the lattice and add a shrink wrap modifier to it. Set to above surface and choose your character head as the target. The lattice should attach straight to the face. Depending on the position of your mouth meshes in relation to your lattice, you might need to move them away slightly so they're not intersecting with your character's face. If your mesh is clipping with the character's face, there are a couple of things we can do. When you're happy with the placement of your mouth rig, there are a couple of ways we can attach it to your character rig. The quickest and easiest way is just to align the mouth rig with your head where you want it. Then we'll add an object constraint, which will be child of. Select the character rig as the target and choose your head bone. If your mouth rig flies away, just clear the inverse. You could also use a copy transforms constraint in the same way. Now that we've joined everything together, we can take a couple more steps to make this look more 2D. We can remove the shadows cast by our mouth mesh by simply disabling shadows in the visibility section of our mouth mesh's object data. M3ers, don't forget to do this to all of your meshes. We can also make the mesh invisible from the back, just in case you couldn't get your mouth completely flush to your face. In Eevee, simply come down to Settings under your selected material, then Surface and find Back Face Culling. Enable that in camera and the mesh will now be invisible from behind. Do that for all of your mouth materials. If you are using cycles, you have to make an adjustment to your shader setups. Near the end of your node tree, between the emission shader and the material output node, we want to make some space. Add a mix shader node and drop it on this connection, ensuring that our emission node is connected to the first input. Then connect a transparent BSDF into the second input. Add a geometry node here and connect back facing to the factor of the mix shader. That should make your mouth invisible from behind. If not, it means your normals have been wrong this whole time. So you can either flip those or switch the inputs on the mix shader, both pretty quick tasks. And congratulations, you now have a fully functional 2D mouth and rig. Stick around for some quick tips and next steps. M2, M3, if you didn't know, you can easily create new shape keys from poses you've made. When you make a pose with the sliders, it changes the values of your shape keys. If we click this drop down and choose New Shape from Mix, then remove our pose, this shape key alone will create the same shape. M2, M3, we can add line art with the grease pencil collection, with our target collection being wherever your mouth meshes are. You can also add noise to this. M2, M3, instead of line art, we could also add 3D lips, which could give a nice claymation look. When your mouth and rig are all done, select the mouth mesh and tab into edit mode. Select all non-manifold edges and duplicate. Then separate that selection. Rename this new object something like lips and add a skin modifier. In edit mode, select all vertices and press Ctrl and A. Now move your mouse away from the cursor to shrink the verts, thereby making the lips thinner. You can make some details in the shape too, if you like. Make sure this modifier is below the lattice and enable smooth shading. Then simply give it a material and you've got some fun lips with all the shape keys and drivers and maybe a subdivision surface modifier. M2, you can make all sorts of changes to your shader. You could get lines in the teeth. You could round off the corners of the teeth. You could add a whole load of teeth. Whatever you do, don't forget to set the correct target for any extra shapes you add in. You could also set a gradient to the mouth or the tongue color. Another fun thing for M2 is making custom shapes to use as masks in your shader, so you can make some more interesting teeth and tongue shapes. Use these images as a mask in place of your gradients and color ramps. You can also switch between these shapes for more posing possibilities. M2 and M3. We can add a bone driver to control the influence of our lattice modifier, meaning we can pull the mesh away from the face if it's clipping or just for the look.